Hey everyone, welcome back. Professor Hank here. It's good to be back with you for another Python video, and today we're going to be talking about logical operators in Python. So let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, what are logical operators? Logical operators are what allow us to combine conditional statements and make more complex decisions. In Python, we have three main logical operators. We've got and, we've got or, and we've got not. So let's break these down with some simple examples. So let us say that I am going to create a variable, Boolean variable, and I'm going to assign to it Boolean value true. And I'm going to assign to another Boolean variable false. So we can see if we print out the results of and, or not, how these things work. So for example, if we say A and B, if we print that out, see on the screen that that is going to be false, because and is only going to return true if both A and B are true. So if we have set our B to true, then that's going to give us true, because true and true is true. Now we also have or. Now with or, we do A or B, then if either of them is true, if either A or B are true, then the whole thing is true. So if we do false here in B, then this is going to evaluate to true because the A is true. Now of course the A and B is false because true and false is false, but for or, true or false is true. And then we've also got our not operator, and the not operator simply flips the truth value of an expression. So if we do something like not A, then what are we going to see from that third print statement? We're going to see false, because something that's not true is false. So to summarize that, and will only return true. This is only true if both conditions are true. Or is true if at least one condition is true. And then not just flips the value. So what do we mean by that? Not true becomes false, and vice versa. So the logical operators are really going to shine when we use them with conditions, such as comparing numbers or checking strings. So let's see an example of that. So let's say that I create a variable age and I assign to it 25, and then let's say that I create a Boolean variable has ID, and that equals true. So if I do that and I write a test expression, if age is greater than or equal to 18 and has ID, then I'll print out, you can enter the club. Else, I'll say, sorry, you can't enter. Sorry, you can't enter. So if I run this, this whole expression here is going to evaluate to true because age contains 25 and 25 is greater than or equal to 18 and has ID is true. So in this example here, this is equal to our A and this is equal to our B. So since both of those are true, the whole thing will be true, and so that first block is going to execute. You can enter the club. Now if we had set age to say 17, well then this first expression is going to be false because 17 is not greater than or equal to 18, and even though has ID is true, the whole thing is going to evaluate to false because false and true is false. Remember, both have to be true in order for the entire thing to be true. So now we see, sorry, you can't enter. So let's take a look at another example, and here we're going to have a username, and we're going to make that admin. Then we'll make up some password, and we'll make that 1234, and we'll use or in this case. So if the username is admin or username is admin, then we'll print username accepted. Now this is useful because the user might enter in lowercase or uppercase, and you might look at that and say, oh well, case is not sensitive in this case. We don't care if it's uppercase or lowercase. So if they type in lowercase admin or they type in uppercase admin, then the username is going to be accepted. So username is accepted because lowercase admin. And then if it was uppercase A admin, because either one, if it's true, the whole thing's true. So then we see that username is accepted. And if it was something else, like say Hank, well then both of these conditions are going to be false. That would be false and that would be false. And so then this block won't execute. So you can see we got no output in that case. So we can accept either uppercase or lowercase admin. Now Python does treat some values as true or false automatically. So these are called truthy and falsy values. So let me give you a couple of examples. So an empty string is going to evaluate to false. So I use the bool conversion function and apply that to an empty string, and you're going to see that it is false. Another example would be if we have a non-empty string. So this might be something like hello. This is going to evaluate to true. So if I run that, then you're going to see the true. And then we can convert the integer 0, and that's going to be false. And then if we do a non-zero integer, say 42, then that is going to be true. So we'll see the results of that as well. So there's the false and the true, just like we said. So this means that we can do things such as this. So let's say that we're going to ask the user for their name. So we might do something like name equals input, enter your name, and then we can test if they actually entered something. So if the name and the length of the name is greater than 2, right? So we're testing this string right here. And if it is, then we will print valid name. Otherwise, we'll print invalid input. So something like this. So I'll enter my name and Hank. So that is a valid name. But if I was to enter in nothing, then I get invalid input. So here we're testing to make sure that not only is name not empty, not an empty string, but also that the length of the name is greater than 2 characters. So if both of those conditions are true, then we consider that a valid name. Otherwise, it's invalid. So let's take a closer look at the not operator. And we use that oftentimes when we want to check the opposite of something. So here's an example. So let's say we've got a variable logged in and that's set to false. So we can say if not logged in. So we're asking a different question. We're not asking you if you are logged in. We're asking you if you're not logged in. So it's a different way of putting it. So then we might say something like, please log in. And so if we run that, then this is going to evaluate to true because remember, not flips the truth value. So logged in contains false and not false is true. So we're going to see please log in. So now let's build a tiny login validator that's going to use all 3 logical operators. So we'll ask the user for their name. So we'll prompt them for their username. Then we will get a password from them. So we'll prompt them to enter their password. And then we'll use an if statement to test these things. So if username and password. So if they actually enter in something other than empty strings for username and password, and the username is admin and the password is secret. If that's the case, if all of those are true, remember with and, everything has to be true in order for the entire thing to be true. So if this is true, if this is true, if this is true, and if this is true, then we'll go ahead and print access granted. Otherwise, we'll print access denied. So let's try that. So now if I don't type anything for my username, I don't type anything for my password, I got my access denied. But if I were to type in a username, admin, and the password, secret, then my access is granted. Now let's take a look at an alternate logic using OR. So we could say something like, if not username or not password, print missing credentials. So what that does is that just checks to see if either of the variables here is empty. So let's run that. So if I do nothing for username and then I do a password say, okay, missing credentials, because this is not username, which becomes true, because remember, username, I didn't enter a string, so that evaluates to false, right? So not false is true. Remember that if either of the expressions is true, then the entire thing is true. So that's why we see, the missing credentials. But if I was to type in something like a username, Hank, and a password, 1234, then we're not going to see missing credentials because both of these are going to evaluate to false, right? Because I did enter a username, so this would be true. So not true is false. And then I did enter a password, so that's true. So not true is false. So false or false is false. So some quick tips before we wrap up. Use parentheses to group conditions when needed. Makes the logic clear, so parentheses. Don't overcomplicate your if statements. If they get messy, feel free to break them up. And then you can test different combinations of true and false to really understand how the logic flows. That's everything I wanted to cover with you in this video. So you've learned how to use and, or, and not to build more flexible, smarter conditions. Try writing a few of your own if statements using these logical operators. It's one of the best ways to learn how to program. Try it, give it a try, trial and error. And as usual, if you're a student of mine, you have questions about the content in this video or any of the videos in our courses, feel free to stop by my online Zoom office hours or email me via Canvas. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.